Now we're going to go on to a discussion about first language acquisition. Because in order to understand second language acquisition, we must first understand what is the normal case of language acquisition, right? And therefore we can say, well, what's then special about second language acquisition? So we'll kind of talk about some of these differences as we go along here. So, what is human language, right? Human language goes beyond tools and symbols. And let me start by telling a little bit about some of the animal communication systems. Okay, now it's very well known that non-human animals, it's a big deal to try to make them learn how to speak. All right, and at the very lowest level, certainly your dog probably understands a few simple commands, right? But does that mean your dog has language? Well, many researchers have tried to teach chimpanzees and other apes, non-human primates, how to communicate. However, what they've been taught is how to mimic some human communication. But this ape language lacks a number of specific human language characteristics. And I'll tell you what that means, right? Very important to note generative grammar, right? The ability to create sentences never before heard to convey complex ideas and concepts. I mean, if you really look at the videos of ape language, for instance, and you say, well, how is this like or different than human language, right? It's very clear. There's a huge difference between ape language and human language. These mimicry of the apes is so far different than what we are actually capable of that it's really difficult to classify these things the same way. Language is also really a true universal, right? Lennenberg's fantastic 1967 piece really looked at a lot of ways in which language is universal. Basically, part of the summary is that all children in all places acquire language in approximately the same way. So a child anywhere in the world is going to go through the same basic stages, even though these things may be, specific to that language. Okay, so properties of human language include it's arbitrary. Very important to start off there, right? The word, what is Spanish for dog? Right? What is French for dog? Clearly, these words don't necessarily match. There's no, this one is the true and this is something else, right? These are arbitrary symbols. Words are arbitrary symbols that hold some kind of meaning, right? Language is transmitted culturally from one generation to the next. It comes in discrete units, and these units are generally words, right, that carry meaning, special meaning. Abstract, both syntactic and semantic. So a sentence has both syntactic and semantic meaning, right, structure and meaning. We have this incredible ability, which was called meta-linguistic ability, where we're actually able to consider and understand and discuss our linguistic ability. And of course, human language is incredibly productive, which means we can create a sentence to describe pretty much anything you can imagine or experience. And again, so far beyond what we've observed animals to do. The human brain, in fact, is set up in a way that really is conducive to language. And very universally, while there are individual differences, of course, there are two main areas in the brain associated with language. And these lie along what is called the Sylvian fissure. One is called Broca's area, and this is, if we look towards the front on the side, and should be pointing at the left side here, okay? Broca's area, which is near the motor cortex and associated with difficulties in producing speech and it's the production of speech, right? So someone with Broca's aphasia would have difficulty producing speech, right? And then further back near the auditory cortex, we have Wernicke's area, which is receptive and linked to understanding meaning, and of course someone with Wernicke's aphasia would have trouble understanding speech. Now, this is a nice kind of delineation. All right, it shows there's a difference in the production and reception of speech. It's very consistent. They're located in areas that are, of course, the productive area should be located in the motor cortex because I'm using a lot of muscles right now as I talk. And of course, the Wernicke's area should be near the auditory cortex because, well, you're using your ears when you listen. infants go through the same process universally in the acquisition of speech, and this is going to be very different than second language learners. So let's take a look. At 6 to 8 weeks old, 6 to 8 weeks, an infant starts to produce vowel sounds. Babbling really is systematic and in some ways part of the process of developing the ability to speak. By 6 to 10 months, they produce consonant vowel patterns, right? And infants receive feedback to their babbling. Also of interesting note, deaf children babble with their hands. Now, all children start babbling at about the same age, regardless of their ambient language. Babbling has syllabic organization, mostly strings of consonant vowels like ba, 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 or ba, da, ba, not associated necessarily with any particular meaning. Of course, your parent is going to say, "Did you hear that? He just said da." He was talking about dad, right? So, also, most produce the same range of consonants, right? Stops, for instance, B and G, and nasals, the M and N sounds, right? And vowels, the low vowels, as in had and in hot. Right? So they tend to stay in this range. Again, these are simpler for an early vocal system to develop. At 8 to 10 months, both consonants and vowels begin to be modulated by the ambient language. So French infants, but not British English infants, pronounced front round vowels because such vowels occur in adult French, but not in British English. Additionally, the French infants produced more labial consonants than British English infants. And that makes sense because adult French has more labials than does English, right? So this is about 8 to 10 months where it really starts to develop into whatever that native language is from this general babbling phrase. This infant language also has some other very interesting characteristics, including routines. Infants develop interactive routines similar to those required in the use of language for communication. So, what are some of these routines? Turn taking. I talk, you talk, and back and forth. Intersubjectivity, which is referring to sharing a common focus. We're able to describe the same thing. Joint attention, which is sharing attention at a particular thing in the world. And pointing. Children begin pointing at around 9 months, and it's used very, very well by 2-year-olds in order to direct attention at a particular thing. Now, some more things about individual infants, right? At about 5 months, they recognize their own name. Before that, probably not, right? At 7 to 8 months, they learn new words. So they may not be able to create them, but this kind of harkens back to the notion that a lot of adults will actually begin teaching their children in sign language for some early words. For instance, they can ask for more, they can kind of get an idea of what they want with some very simple hand gestures because the ability, that fine motor control of the hands actually develops faster than the motor control in the vocal tract needed in order to produce spoken words. So they're able to actually mimic that first. At around 6 months, they learn reference, and reference is very important. Now, the idea of reference comes from, is really well described by Willard Quine, right, an excellent American philosopher. And if you've heard the word gavagai, you know what I'm talking about, right? Now, the word gavagai comes from the idea that, okay, how do we know what things refer to? How do we find meaning? Let's take the example of, an explorer comes across a new tribe with a new language that has never been heard before. They see a rabbit run across, and somebody from the tribe goes and points and says, gavagai. What are they referring to? What does gavagai mean? Does this mean rabbit? Does this mean food? Does this mean white fluffy thing, or things with ears, or running, or hiding? It could mean all sorts of things, right? Understanding the referent is actually really quite an interesting feat.